Dear intergalactic travellers, welcome to our exploration of what does the investor need, or perhaps more precise, what does the investor want? Such broad questions are far-reaching, well beyond the immediate products, services, taxes and regulations that dominate our industry thinking. Indeed, Douglas Adams perplexed over the universal meaning of things. So we must too confront existentialism, pandemics, climate change, social injustice, fake news, automation, the demise of moderation, and the increase of gratification and tribalism. A universal problem and a great dichotomy between greater economic prosperity and totality versus increasing disquiet as to ecology, transparency, tax avoidance, wealth inequality, longevity, and mortality. But don't panic. Beset with Brexit, coronavirus, and market volatility, welcome to the New Fund Order, a guide of sorts to a universal question. In an increasingly commoditised and digitalised world, who even cares what anyone wants? In our personally curated Black Mirror silos, do we even stop to consider what others want, or only ourselves? What a depressing thought. What then is the question? Asset management continually asks the seemingly impossible. What does the investor want? The very notion of a typical investor itself defies description. Yet in its absence, as an industry, we have herded millions of investors into increasingly standardised products, indices, and solutions. We even look to big computers to offer us hope. Of course, big computers might not provide the answer we were looking for. In Hitchhikers, Douglas Adams created deep thought to calculate the answer to the ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything. The answer was 42. Yes, 42. It took deep thought 7.5 million years to compute and check the answer. The answer seemingly meaningless because the beings who instructed deep thought never actually understood what the question should be. Oh, how so true then for our industry. We design, invent, market, and manage, but often we do not understand the ultimate question before us, and therefore incapable of computing the answers needed. We construct entire supply chains that do not even have to think of the question on a daily basis. Alas, we don't have deep thought, so to find the answer we need to rewind back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Now, contrary to popular belief, toilet paper is not now the currency foundation of society, even if it is the bottom need for most of us. Rather, Maslow's hierarchy is a visual representation of the theory put forward by Abraham Maslow in his 1943 paper, A Theory of Human Motivation. In the absence of economic safety, Maslow believed safety needs manifest like job security, worker rights, protection schemes, insurance policies, safe investments. Safety and security needs are about keeping us safe from harm. These include shelter and safe environments. If a person does not feel safe in an environment, they will seek to find safety before they attempt to meet any higher level of survival. Yet whilst the need for safety is not as important as basic psychological needs as food or shelter, safety, as it relates to financial security and future uncertainty, is the fundamental need required from finance. Yet, much like the toilet roll, Maslow emphasised that order of needs here is flexible, not rigid. The popular pyramid so oft used is misleading in this respect. There's a fluidity and an overlap between levels, and people may move between them based on circumstances, and this is very true of finance and asset management. Even a diversified risk-rated portfolio is an overlap of needs, from safe assets to riskier investments, capital preservation versus growth or income, an investor's need, their utility, can be both fixed and inconsistent. Thus, downside protection versus opportunity potential, short-term financing versus long-term goals, fear and greed. For investment as it relates to economic security, it satisfies a person's need for safety. Thus, having a stable income or resources to support a standard of living now and in the foreseeable future requires solvency, predictability of future cash flow, employment security, and retirement. In the classical Western model, investing may even serve to satisfy esteem needs, to attain financial freedom, to become rich, retire early, and to pass on wealth, independence, time unconstrained, freedom. But the behaviours of investors cannot be fully answered by Maslow's, as observed investor behaviour continues to defy the simple needs for safety and esteem. Maslow's mistake was assuming the investor is wholly logical to do what is in the best interest according to need. Yet many investors, as we know, can prove to be irrational beings at the best of times, as identified by John Keynes. They are all too often subject to animal spirits. We can hitchhike our way across different theories that help answer our question. So to expand on Maslow, we should also consider Freud's three states of self. Freud's personality theory divides the self into three parts: the id, ego, and superego, all developing at different stages in our lives. These are mental systems, not physical parts of the brain. According to Freud, in each investor you have the id, our primitive, irrational, and instinctive self; ego, our reality self, our decision maker; and superego, our moral self, our sense of protection. And yet Freud really just leaves us at the tip of the iceberg, because the digital self, as a version of ourselves, can diverge id from ego, and therefore diverge irrational desires from irrational needs. In only 10 years, social media and the digital self has radically altered people's behaviours, and therefore perception and actualisation when it comes to investing. On average, we check our smartphones 200 times a day for emails, alerts, tweets, or text messages. That's before using any one of our phone's applications. It is a function of our continuous connectivity to one another and the world beyond that is now so unprecedented. And rightly, fears are growing as to where social media is taking us. Father of the internet, Tim Berners-Lee, called for a reinvention of social media towards constructive criticism and harmony. The new Netflix documentary, The Social Dilemma, is powerful, alarming, poignant, and well worth watching. There is, of course, a huge behaviour aspect to this, and therefore the heuristics work by the likes of Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman are, of course, useful. In his best-selling book, Thinking Fast and Slow, Nobel Prize winner Daniel Kahneman argued that the human mind is configured according to two basic systems: instinctive and deliberative, like Freud's id and ego. System 1 thinking may often make mistakes, be irrational, and rely on the subconscious, but it allows for fast decision making, vital for survival. System 2 thinking is slower and more deliberative. You gather evidence, exercise judgment, discuss to arrive at decisions, but it is time consuming, intellectually challenging, and therefore harder. Understanding how investors are changed by digital is thus essential to understanding what they want. Whether it is trolling and abuse on Twitter, to the curating of lives, joining Facebook groups, commenting on the trivial, to the macro, we have become socially connected on a scale never previously conceived by Maslow or Freud. A new study by the universities of Swansea and Milan has established that excessive use of social media, in particular the posting of images and selfies, is associated with a subsequent increase in narcissism. There are an increasing number of studies that observe that social media is impacting our moods. He notes over the last 2 decades, social media investing has changed in character, citing examples that have changed behaviour like Motley Fools forming a strong attraction in the US. People loved its online chat rooms and bulletin boards, busy with investors talking stock. These websites were followed by pyramidal platforms from the early 2010s, including seekingalpha.com, and that's all about financial gurus working their way up the pyramid based on online reputation. Now, along with social media, these community platforms are changing behaviour, devoid of traditional investing advice and information. It is easy to see then how the old fund order has become increasingly outmoded by this digital activity. Even up to 2010, firms were still deliberating if the internet was a thing and whether they needed more than a web page or whether social media would catch on. The old fund order was our industry as we knew it, one of closed asset management, legacy closed network technologies, intermediation, opaque omnibus and nominee companies, product churn, inequality, tax evasion, commission, increasing complexity, marketing and communication. A time of the trusted handshake when it sealed deals and our word was still our bond, when investing information was just for the few, when investors received carefully curated advice and employers controlled the pension schemes of their workers. It was all about seats at tables, mathematical brains, in trays, memos, calculators, and lots. Forged by digital and actualised by COVID-19, we are now confronted with a new universe, one that is every bit as bizarre and inexplicable as the one it replaced. In this new fund order, we need to adjust our sociological and psychological expectations of what investors actually want, just as their needs are changing, to recognise that physical needs and digital wants can and will diverge. We can see this flips the truisms of the old fund order on its head. Once disintermediated, the digital investor will forever act differently to the physical investor. Investors are rebelling. And whilst understanding the implications of digitalisation is both complex and challenging, we can already see signs how society, the political class and media have challenged the old fund order, as the needs and wants of investors evolve with digitalisation. In essence, we can observe what investors want as a product of their actions and the industry's response. These simplify down into 4 main themes. Predictability. Investors hate negative surprises. Maslow asserts that need for safety, here governance, regulation, fairness, revulsion towards scams and poor outcomes all come into play. Transparency. As investors become disintermediated and increasingly altered by social media, they seek information in order to give consent and rejection of perceived excessive costs. Latency. Digitalisation is driving a rising intolerance of delay. This has huge implications for asset management. A desire for all things to be connected on a mobile device, accessible at the click of a button, and it's what's drawing us towards open finance. Sustainability and equality. The growing awareness of the connection between what is happening to the planet and what is happening in the portfolio is driving activism. We also see a growing push towards fairness and representation. Now investors seek liberation through technology to express their needs and desires at an individual and social collective level, to address inequality, injustice, and climate change. And while such notions are nothing new, understanding how investor needs and wants are evolving, particularly as a consequence of social media and digitalisation, is. Thus, first agree that where the industry is misaligned with the needs and wants of investors, then it will also more likely face obsolescence. Products and infrastructures that have no clear benefit to the end investor will become increasingly rejected. The New Fund Order even questions the morality of our industry, so eloquently put by Adam Smith. The idea of social conscience resonates so favourably with our superegos. Once we recognise our role is to serve society rather than shareholders, then we move a step closer to meeting the needs of the investor. But don't panic. Now we understand the question, we can start to think about the answer.